Let's now welcome SABC International News Editor Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, a very good afternoon to you. So this bill that is known as the US-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act of 2025 is the first stage, essentially, of the legislative process towards becoming law. So help us place what it entails and what more we know about the man who introduced it.
Well, the man who introduced the bill is a member of the Congress, and he is a Republican, the party of President Donald Trump. Secondly, this bill, this is not something new. It is an individual who has gotten a support of one or two members of the Congress, and he was able to present this bill, not an act of parliament, before the committee. As you know, that the same will apply to South Africa when there's someone who is sponsoring a bill. It will go before the committee, it will go before parliament and COP, and then it will then have to be signed by the president to become an act. And in that process, there's a possibility that the next step, it's likely not going to happen, depending on the numbers. For example, in this case, yes, he got support from the committee. Now this bill must go before the Congress, more than 500 people, and it must be a majority who will vote and support that bill. You have two parties that are dominating the Congress, the Republicans and the Democrats. With the current tension between the Democrats and the Republicans, you will see a situation where not everybody will support this bill. It is even more difficult because as we speak, the Congress is in recess. Members will only come back in September. So we'll see that bill being tabled there, and then it will be a time to lobby support. If it gets through the Congress, it must now go to the Senate. A similar process will happen. If this bill gets approval before the Senate, then the President of the United States of America must sign that bill into law, and then the implementation also take time. And it's not the first time we see these kinds of sponsored bills by individuals. Some of them, they don't even see the light of the day at times. And we've seen it during President Biden's tenure. There were individuals who were pushing certain bills aimed at punishing those who are friends with Russia. That was after the Russia-Ukraine war started, and South Africa was caught in that crossfire with the Lady R. But what happened? Those initiatives didn't see the light of the day, and therefore we have to be careful of being excited and saying that this is what's going to happen. It is still a process. It has a long way to go. And secondly, you must take into consideration that next year, the Americans will have midterm elections. And based on the challenges we see in the US as it relates to President Trump, whose support is basically people who support the Republicans waning a bit, there's a possibility that the Congress might be different in terms of balance of power between the Democrats and the Republicans. And therefore, these are the dynamics that we must take into consideration. And lastly, President Trump is left with 3 years in office. As you know, that the term of office of the President of the United States of America is 4 years. And therefore, in 3 years, it's quite short to process some of these things. And we don't know who is going to be the next president of the US and what policy direction he will propagate as the new leader of the United States of America. So that's the process. But perhaps, Unat, you know, 2 weeks ago, when there was a BRICS summit in Brazil, I discussed this issue with the Minister of International Relations, Minister Ronald Lamola, because there were these reports, and the lobby groups, those who are supporting Israel, have been pushing for isolation of South Africa and individuals. It has to do with South Africa's position on the Middle East, particularly the ICJ case. And people were saying that some individuals must be targeted, particularly from the African National Congress, with this foreign policy that we have. Perhaps let's look back at that interaction I had with Minister of International Relations, Ronald Lamola, about reports that there are individuals within the ANC who might be targeted for America to impose sanctions on those individuals. Let's listen in.
What we have seen is that public communication that we have seen or heard through the public statements that have been made by the African groups that did visit the US, Freedom Front Plus, and the other one for some farmers. But we don't have an official communication to that effect. And once we do have it, we will respond appropriately. What we can say is that the South African government at international relations can only be represented by mandated state actors, the South African government, and those that may be mandated by the state outside who may be non-state actors to play a particular role that will be of national interest, not a role that is of only a particular sector of the South African community. And it is well known that the South African government has a constitution which gives every South African a right, black, white, Indian, everyone have got a role to play, colors, irrespective of race or gender. So our country has got enough safeguards to deal with any issue that could be of concern to anyone.
Well, that is Minister of International Relations, because these reports started making the rounds after some organizations in South Africa indicated that in their interaction with some officials in the White House and at the State Department in the US, there's an indication that some officials of the ANC or individuals in South Africa are going to have to deal with sanctions that are likely going to be imposed on them. And now this bill that speaks to that speaks to the isolation of South Africa. And I think in that context, it is a continuation of where you have people in South Africa who have their own agendas, who are working with some lobby groups, who are supporting Israel, trying to isolate South Africa. And therefore, we will see what's going to happen. As I pointed out, it's too early to tell how long will it take for this to become an act, and therefore whether it will see even the light of the day in the Congress or in the Senate, and finally the President of the US signing off and implementing it. Trump is left with 3 years. Trump is under siege because of the Epstein file. And there's a lot that he has to deal with because there are people who are pushing for his impeachment.